Tonight we step beneath the white heat of ancient Egypt into a world where justice is not only spoken in courtrooms, but carved into stone, whispered in temples, and feared in the smallest village lanes. In 1922, when Howard Carter opened the tomb of Tutankhamun, the world saw gold, beauty, and silence. Yet Egyptologists at Oxford, Yale, and the Metropolitan Museum of Art have long studied another Egypt beneath that glittering surface, an Egypt of legal complaints, police reports, witness statements, beatings, exile, and death. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as the night settles around you, leave your country, your city, and your local time in the comments, so that somewhere across the world, another quiet listener may know they are not alone. You're standing now in the hard brightness of the Nile Valley. The river slides past like dark green glass. Date palms tremble in the heat. Mud brick houses breathe out the scent of dust, bread, sweat, and smoke. Somewhere, a donkey complains with tragic sincerity, as donkeys have always done. Even in a kingdom of gods, someone still has to carry the baskets. Around you, Egypt seems orderly at first glance. Fields are measured, taxes are counted, granaries are sealed, priests wash themselves before dawn, scribes sit with reed pens and ink cakes, scratching careful lines onto papyrus. The sun rises, the river floods, the temples glow, and every life appears to have its place. But listen more closely. There is another sound beneath the calm. Sandals scrape across a courtyard. A woman speaks too quickly, trying not to sound afraid. A man swears he did not steal the copper tool. A village official narrows his eyes. A scribe waits, patient and dangerous, because once ink touches papyrus, a spoken fear becomes an official matter. Justice in ancient Egypt does not begin with a judge in a robe. It begins with balance. The Egyptians imagined the world held together by order, truth, right conduct, and proper arrangement. Modern historians often call this principle by its Egyptian name, though tonight we may think of it simply as the Great Balance. It was the idea that the river should rise in season, the king should rule rightly, the dead should be honoured, and people should not disturb the fragile pattern of existence. That sounds peaceful, almost beautiful. It was not always gentle. When someone stole grain, lied in testimony, moved a boundary stone, robbed a tomb, plotted against the palace, or insulted the sacred order, the crime was not merely personal. It could be seen as a wound in the structure of the world. A missing sack of barley might begin as hunger, yet in the mind of authority, it could become disorder, rebellion, and danger. Records from the village of Deir el-Medina, studied carefully by scholars from the University of Chicago and other major research centers, show ordinary workers filing complaints, naming witnesses, and appealing to officials. These were not legends about kings. They were the small legal anxieties of real households, real neighbors, and real grudges. You can almost see the village at dusk. Stone cliffs rise around it like sleeping beasts. The houses are close together. Smoke drifts from cooking fires. Children chase one another through narrow paths until a parent calls them inside. Behind one doorway, a family counts what remains of their grain. Behind another, someone hides something that is not theirs. The court does not need marble columns. It may be a courtyard, an administrative office, or a gathering before local officials. The air smells of sun-baked brick and old papyrus. A scribe dips his pen. Witnesses speak. Accusers repeat what they saw, or what they claim they saw. Defendants deny, hesitate, bargain, tremble, or stand with stubborn pride. Here, truth is supposed to be discovered, yet truth often arrives tired. One mainstream historical fact is clear from surviving documents. Ancient Egypt had legal procedures involving testimony, petitions, officials, and written records. This was not a place of random chaos where punishment simply fell from the sky. There were systems, there were offices, there were appeals. There were people whose job was to hear disputes and preserve decisions, but a system can be organised and still be frightening. In fact, organisation can make fear more efficient. A scribe does not need to shout. He only needs to write your name correctly. A quirky tidbit rests in the strange intimacy of Egyptian legal life. Some disputes read less like grand royal drama and more like neighbourhood trouble that got completely out of hand. People complained about stolen garments, missing tools, insults, debt, inheritance, and domestic betrayal. Across thousands of years, the paperwork suggests a humbling truth. Ancient people were majestic, spiritual, artistic, and deeply capable of arguing over household property. Humanity remains consistent. The open scholarly debate begins in the shadows between ideal and practice. Researchers at institutions such as Oxford and Harvard continue to discuss how far Egyptian justice truly served ordinary people and how far it protected the state, temples, and wealthy households. Was the law a path to fairness or a polished instrument of control? The answer shifts depending on the period, the region, and the person standing before the officials. For a farmer, justice might mean recovering stolen animals. For a widow, it might mean defending property from relatives who suddenly remember how much they loved the deceased. For a labourer, it might mean complaining about unpaid rations. For the palace, justice meant something far larger and colder. It meant keeping the land obedient beneath the gaze of the Pharaoh. You begin to feel the double nature of it. Egyptian justice had a human face and a divine mask. It could settle quarrels, protect contracts, and punish theft. It could also crush bodies, silence enemies, and turn suffering into public instruction. A punished criminal did not suffer alone. Their pain became a message. Imagine a marketplace near the river. Fish lie on mats, silver and slick in the morning light. Baskets of onions, figs, and bread crowd the stalls. A potter argues over payment. A child reaches for dates and is pulled away by the wrist. Nearby, people stop talking as officials pass. They know what authority looks like. They know the careful posture of a man hoping not to be noticed. They know when laughter should become quiet. They know that a careless accusation can ruin a life. Yet silence can also be dangerous. In a society built on order, everyone participates in watching everyone else. A village can become a court long before any official arrives. The deeper truth is not that Egypt was uniquely cruel. Many ancient societies punished harshly. The unsettling truth is more delicate. Egypt built one of history's most enduring visions of cosmic harmony, then placed human bodies beneath that vision when harmony seemed threatened. Beauty and fear lived close together. The temple wall and the punishment post belonged to the same world, and beneath the golden names of kings, beneath the painted tombs and solemn gods, there were people who woke each morning hoping not to be accused. They stepped into sunlight, carried water, measured grain, bowed to officials, and guarded their words. They lived beneath a justice that promised balance, but sometimes demanded pain. So now, as the heat softens and the first stars appear above the Nile, you remain at the edge of that ancient court. The scribe lifts his reed pen, the accused man swallows, the witnesses shift in the dust. Somewhere in the distance, temple singers begin their evening hymn, calm and beautiful, as if the world is still perfectly arranged. Perhaps that is the first dark truth of Pharaoh's justice. It did not see itself as darkness, it saw itself as order. The king is not merely a ruler in this world. He is the breathing centre of the visible order, the golden hinge between earth and heaven. When he speaks, the command does not sound like an opinion. It settles over the land as law, ritual, memory, and threat. You stand in a palace courtyard while morning light climbs the painted columns. The air smells of oiled wood, linen, incense, and stone warmed by sunrise. Guards wait with straight backs. Officials carry sealed documents against their chests. No one moves casually here. Even silence seems trained. The pharaoh's justice begins with an ancient claim. The king is supposed to preserve balance. He must feed the gods with offerings, protect the borders, restrain disorder, and judge the people beneath him. To modern eyes, this may look like politics dressed as religion. To many ancient Egyptians, it was the structure of reality itself. That made disobedience dangerous. A crime against a neighbour could become a disturbance in the royal order. A crime against the state could become something almost cosmic. The line between practical government and sacred duty was thin, sometimes so thin that no frightened person could see it. A stolen tax payment, a false oath, a broken seal, or a curse against the king might carry more weight than the act itself seemed to deserve. Power enjoys sacred clothing. Egyptologists at major universities, including Oxford and the University of Chicago, have shown that royal decrees, temple inscriptions, and administrative records placed the pharaoh at the summit of justice. Local courts might hear disputes, viziers might supervise legal matters, scribes might preserve complaints and decisions. Yet in theory, every judgment flowed from the king's responsibility to maintain the proper order of the land. That is the mainstream historical fact. Quiet but enormous. Egyptian justice was not separated from kingship in the modern sense. Law, authority, religion, and royal image were woven tightly together. The pharaoh did not simply enforce rules. He embodied the reason rules existed. Your mind drifts into the great audience hall. Painted lotus blossoms spread across columns like frozen gardens. The floor is cool beneath bare feet. Somewhere behind a screen, servants whisper and vanish. A petitioner waits with dust on his legs, holding a complaint that has travelled from village hands into official attention. He may never see the king. Most people never would. Still, the king's shadow is present. It falls across every official seal, every punishment order, every tax demand, every oath sworn in fear. A local administrator may make the decision, but the structure behind him is royal. Even when the pharaoh is far away, he is close enough to frighten. And that is one of the strange powers of monarchy. Distance increases mystery. A ruler unseen can become larger than a ruler standing before you. He becomes image, symbol, statue, name, and rumour. He becomes the painted face on temple walls, striking enemies by the hair. He becomes the seated figure receiving tribute. He becomes the one who hears everything, even when he hears almost nothing. A quirky tidbit appears in the grand exaggeration of royal imagery. Temple scenes often show the pharaoh defeating whole crowds of enemies in a single mighty pose. One king, one raised weapon, many helpless foes. It is not battlefield reporting in the modern sense. It is political theatre carved in stone. The message is simple enough for a sleepy child to understand. The king crushes chaos. Subtlety, apparently, was not always invited to the ceremony. Yet the performance mattered. When a criminal was punished, the punishment echoed the same idea. Disorder had risen, authority had answered, balance had been restored, at least in public. The body of the guilty person became part of the language of rule. Pain could be displayed as proof that the king's world still held. You hear sandals moving across polished floors. A vizier enters, carrying the weight of the office like a heavy collar. The vizier was among the highest officials in Egypt, responsible for administration, legal supervision, and the smooth movement of royal business. Instructions preserved from ancient tradition describe him as one who must listen to petitioners and act without favoritism. That is the ideal. The reality is harder to hold. An open, scholarly debate remains over how consistently royal justice matched its moral language. Researchers at Yale, Cambridge, and other leading centres have explored the tension between official ideals and actual practice. Did Egyptian courts genuinely restrain elite abuse? Or did they mostly protect hierarchy while allowing limited fairness below? The evidence gives glimpses, not perfect answers. Some records show ordinary people making claims and winning recognition. That matters. It tells you that the system was not pure theatre. People used it. They believed, at least sometimes, that authority could correct wrongs. A poor worker could bring a grievance. A woman could defend property. A witness could be named. A decision could be recorded. But other evidence suggests the powerful stood on safer ground. Their voices carried farther. Their ties mattered more. Their punishments might bend around status, service, and usefulness. It is a familiar old melody, played on a very ancient instrument. For a moment, it feels as though the palace breathes around you. Every wall says the same thing in colour, shape, and ritual. The king is order. The king is victory. The king is justice. The king is beloved by the gods. The repetition is calming, almost hypnotic, until you remember why repetition is needed. People must be taught what to fear. The Pharaoh's living command was not always shouted through executions or public spectacle. Often it moved through documents, a decree sent to a local official, a sealed instruction carried by a messenger, a list of workers assigned to hard labour, a report demanding investigation. The machinery of justice could be quiet, patient, and deeply ordinary. A man might wake in his village and discover that the palace had entered his life on a scrap of papyrus. His name, his father's name, his accusation, his obligation, his punishment. There is a particular terror in being reduced to neat handwriting. Ink can travel where mercy does not. The royal system also had a memory. Records preserved obligations, debts, taxes, and names. In a land where the Nile could erase footprints by morning, writing made certain actions difficult to bury. The scribe's reed pen became a small instrument of immortality. Not the pleasant kind promised in tomb paintings, the administrative kind, which is much less flattering. You may smile gently at that, because even paradise has paperwork. But the darker truth remains. The Pharaoh's justice did not only ask whether a person had harmed another person, it asked whether that person had disturbed a world the king was sworn to preserve. That made justice larger than fairness. It made justice sacred. It made punishment feel necessary. In the cooling shade of the palace, you sense the ancient bargain. The people give labour, obedience, grain, service, and silence. The king gives order, protection, ritual stability, and the promise that chaos will not swallow the fields. When the bargain holds, life continues. When it breaks, someone must pay. Perhaps the most unsettling part is how beautiful the idea sounds. A ruler keeping the world balanced, a land protected from disorder, a justice rooted in truth rather than appetite. But beauty can sharpen a blade. When authority believes it defends the universe, it can punish without hearing the small human voice beneath the accusation. The king remains distant, shining, untouchable. His statues stare beyond the present hour. His officials bend over cases or his guards watch the doors. His name travels farther than his footsteps. And across the Nile Valley, beneath blue sky and drifting dust, people learn that justice is not only what is right, it is what the Pharaoh commands to be right. The first thing you notice is not the voice of a judge. It is the scratching of a reed pen, thin, dry, patient. It moves across a sheet of papyrus while dust floats in the light, and the room holds its breath around a man who knows how to turn speech into evidence. The scribe sits with his writing board balanced before him. Black ink waits for ordinary words. Red ink waits for headings, warnings, names, and things needing attention. His hands are steady. His face gives little away. He has heard frightened voices, angry voices, rehearsed voices, and voices that change halfway through a sentence. He knows people. The court around him may be simple, a shaded space, a bench of officials, a few witnesses standing with stiff shoulders, a servant at the doorway, pretending not to listen while listening magnificently. Outside, the village carries on with its usual sounds. Goats complain, children shout, someone pounds grain with slow, wooden rhythm. Inside, every word becomes dangerous. In ancient Egypt, guilt was often measured through testimony, reputation, documents, and the judgment of officials. There were no modern forensic laboratories, no fingerprint files, no polite detective with a thoughtful hat. There were witnesses, oaths, written complaints, physical signs, and the social knowledge of people who lived far too closely together. A mainstream historical fact stands clearly from surviving legal material. Egyptian scribes recorded petitions, contracts, interrogations, witness lists, and court decisions across many centuries. Researchers from the University of Chicago and Yale have studied these records as windows into daily life, showing that legal culture depended heavily on written procedure. That gives the scribe a strange power. He is not always the highest official in the room. He may not decide the punishment, yet he controls the shape of memory. If your words enter the record poorly, you may spend years wishing breath could be rewritten. A hesitation can look like weakness. A contradiction can harden into suspicion. A missing detail can become a door through which punishment walks quietly. The air smells of ink, linen, sweat, and crushed reeds. Your eyes follow the scribe's hand. He notes the accuser's claim. He marks the name of the accused. He listens while a witness says he saw a jar carried at dusk. Another says he heard a quarrel near the granary. A third remembers nothing, which may be honest, cowardly, or wonderfully convenient. Human memory is slippery. The officials know this too. They ask questions in careful order. When did you see him? Who stood nearby? Was the seal broken? Did anyone else enter the storehouse? Did you report it at once? Why not? The questions sound plain, but they press like thumbs into wet clay. An accused person might defend himself through denial, counter-accusation, sworn statement, or appeal to known character. He might bring neighbours to speak for him. He might claim the goods were borrowed, not stolen. That little difference could matter greatly, as anyone who has ever borrowed something forever may appreciate. A quirky tidbit appears in the everyday texture of these records. Some surviving disputes feel astonishingly familiar, despite the solemn gods painted nearby. People argued over property lines, missing tools, unpaid goods, family inheritance, and personal insults. The ancient court sometimes resembles a village meeting where everyone knows everyone, and nobody has forgotten anything since childhood. This is what makes justice intimate. Modern people often imagine ancient punishment beginning with dramatic arrest. But much of Egyptian justice began as complaint. Someone spoke. Someone carried that speech upward. A small matter entered a chain of authority. The village became a web, and every neighbour might become a thread tightening around a suspect. You hear the scribe repeat a phrase aloud, making sure the wording is proper. He does not decorate. He does not soften. He fixes the accusation into an official form, and suddenly the matter feels heavier. The accused man watches the ink darken. Perhaps he is guilty. Perhaps he is not. Either way, the record now has more confidence than he does. There is a particular chill in that. Written justice promised order because it preserved statements beyond the heat of the moment. It also created distance. Once a case became writing, it could travel to offices, superiors, and archives, where no one knew the smell of the accused man's house or the fear in his daughter's eyes. The record could outlive context. Still, written procedure also protected some people. A claim placed in writing could stop a stronger neighbour from pretending nothing had happened. A woman defending property could point to earlier agreements. A worker owed rations could make a complaint more difficult to ignore. Ink could serve the weak as well as the powerful, though never evenly enough for comfort. The court listens to witnesses. They do not always agree. One man remembers the accused wearing a pale linen wrap. Another insists it was dark. A woman says she heard the accused swear by a god that he would take revenge. Someone else says that woman disliked him already. The officials lean back, weighing not only the words but the people who speak them. Reputation enters the room like another witness. In a small community, character could influence belief. A person known for quarrels might be suspected quickly. A respected artisan might be given more room to explain. A foreign labourer, servant, or person without powerful kin could face a harder path. The law may speak of truth, but society decides whose voice sounds truthful. An open scholarly debate continues among historians at Oxford, Stanford, and other major institutions over how much Egyptian legal practice depended on formal rules rather than local negotiation. Some evidence suggests flexible, practical decision-making. Other evidence reveals strong administrative habits and repeated formulas. The truth may rest between them, where most human systems quietly live. You can feel that mixture now. The officials want order restored. The accuser wants satisfaction. The accused wants escape, vindication, or perhaps simply a lesser blow. The scribe wants clarity, or at least enough clarity to satisfy the office. The witnesses want to survive their own words. Everyone understands that justice is not an abstract cloud floating above them. It is a human arrangement, made by tired people in hot rooms, and yet the ritual of it matters. Questions give fear a shape. Statements give anger a boundary. Writing gives memory a spine. Without these things, every accusation would be a storm. With them, the storm becomes a document. That is not the same as fairness, but it is not nothing. A small clay seal lies on the table. It carries the impression of authority, pressed into mud, dried hard, and meant to guard a storeroom, a jar, a bundle, a door. Break the seal, and the act speaks even before witnesses do. In a world of sealed goods and counted grain, clay could accuse silently. The scribe notes it all. He records the broken edge. He records the missing measure. He records who had access and who claimed ignorance. His writing is calm enough to seem innocent, but the accused knows that calm systems can hurt more efficiently than angry men. A fist tires. A record does not. Outside, the afternoon lowers itself gently over the settlement. The smell of bread grows warmer. The river wind reaches the doorway with a touch of dampness. Life goes on because life is rude like that. It continues even when one person's future is being folded into official language. The scribe lifts his pen. For one suspended moment, nobody speaks. The officials have heard enough for now. The witnesses stare at the floor. The accused feels the air thicken around his chest. Perhaps judgment will come swiftly. Perhaps the matter will climb higher. Perhaps more questioning waits in another room, less gentle than this one. The ink dries, and in that drying, a person becomes a case. The granary stands at the edge of the settlement like a quiet promise. Its walls are thick, its doorway sealed, its contents measured by men whose fingers know the value of every basket. Inside, grain rests in dimness, dry and pale, smelling faintly of earth, straw, and survival. You stand near it in the hour before dawn. The sky is not yet gold, it is blue-black, soft and secretive. A dog moves along a wall with its nose low. Somewhere in the darkness, a person waits too long in a place where honest people do not usually wait. Hunger makes its own laws. In Egypt, grain is not only food, it is tax, salary, wealth, storage, state power, temple offering, and future life. A worker may receive rations in grain. A household may depend on measured amounts between harvests. A temple may hold immense supplies in its magazines. A government official may know that famine begins not with empty fields, but with empty containers. So when grain disappears, the loss is never small. It might begin as a missing sack. It might become an accusation of theft from the state. It might touch a temple estate, a royal storehouse, or the ration system that feeds labourers and families. In a society where bread and beer are daily foundations, grain crime reaches into every stomach. Records confirm that grain was a central unit of administration and payment in ancient Egypt. Scholars at the Oriental Institute of the University of Chicago, along with researchers at Oxford and Cambridge, have studied ration lists, tax records, and village accounts that show how carefully agricultural produce was counted. Egypt's wealth did not simply glitter in tombs. Much of it sat in baskets, jars, and storage rooms. That is the mainstream fact, practical and heavy. The dark truth is that such careful counting creates temptation. When everything is measured, every missing measure becomes visible. A handful taken in fear may be noticed. A sack moved at night may leave traces. A seal broken in haste may accuse the thief before the thief has spoken. The granary shadows are full of ordinary desperation. Imagine a man whose children have eaten thin bread for several days. His work ration has been delayed. His wife has watered the beer until it barely tastes of anything. He sees grain carried past him by men who complain about the weight. He knows where it is stored. He knows who watches the door. He knows when the watchman drinks. Perhaps he tells himself he is borrowing. That word comforts many thieves. A quirky tidbit from village life is that some accusations involve items so humble they almost make the ancient world blink into the present. Tools, sandals, cloth, baskets, small animals, and food appear beside more serious crimes. The people who built and decorated royal tombs could still fall into arguments over everyday objects, because civilization may build pyramids, but it also misplaces sandals. The sandals matter, though. A stolen tool can stop a worker earning his ration. A missing donkey can ruin a transport task. A taken garment can humiliate a household. In a world where possessions are fewer and labour is constant, small theft has large echoes. Modern abundance can make this difficult to feel. Ancient scarcity does not forgive so easily. You move through a narrow village lane. The walls are close, rough beneath your palm. The scent of dung fuel and morning bread curls through the air. A woman opens her doorway and sees officials approaching. She knows the look of inquiry. Her face changes before anyone speaks. A granary seal has been broken. The investigation begins with access. Who held the key? Who watched the door? Who worked nearby? Who owed grain? Who had argued with the storekeeper? Officials do not need mystery when they have routine. They follow habit, names, grudges, and opportunity. A village is a small net. Most fish have been seen swimming somewhere. If the suspected thief is poor, his poverty may make him plausible. If he is disliked, dislike may become evidence before anyone admits it. If he is connected to an official, the path may bend. Justice walks differently on different floors. That is not unique to Egypt. It is painfully human. Yet theft in Egypt could also become morally charged because property was tangled with order. The grain in a storehouse represented planned distribution. To steal it was to pull at a thread in the woven system. If enough threads frayed, workers went unpaid, temples lacked offerings, officials lost control, and the image of stability cracked. The crime could be small. The fear behind the punishment could be large. In the heat of morning, a suspect is brought before local authorities. He may insist that he entered only to check damage from rats. Rats, naturally, are ancient accomplices of suspicious convenience. He may say another man opened the door first. He may swear by a god that he touched nothing. The scribe writes. The witnesses watch him sweat. The missing grain sits in everyone's imagination. Egyptian justice cares deeply about recovery. Punishment matters, but so does restitution. If stolen goods can be returned, the injured household or institution may regain its property. Sometimes compensation, repayment, or replacement stands at the centre of a dispute. But theft from state or temple supplies can bring sharper consequences, because such theft reaches upward. An open scholarly debate continues among historians at Yale, Oxford, and the University of California over how far Egyptian local courts treated theft as economic damage rather than moral disorder. Some documents appear practical, focused on recovery and confession. Other cases suggest a harsher symbolic framework, especially when sacred or royal property was involved. That debate leaves you with an uneasy thought. A hungry thief and a greedy thief may both break the same seal. The court may not care equally about the difference. Or perhaps it does, sometimes. in ways the surviving records only partly reveal. Ancient documents are not full hearts. They are fragments of decisions, leaving the breath between lines mostly lost. Now the sun rises, light reaches the granary wall and turns the mud brick honey-coloured. Men lift baskets. A measuring cord lies coiled like a sleeping snake. The accused stands near the doorway, eyes lowered. He can hear his own breathing. He can smell the grain he may have taken, or may only be accused of taking. The smell is unbearable. Punishment for theft could include beating, forced labour, restitution, or harsher penalties depending on the status of the property in the period. The important thing is not one single rule, neat and modern. The important thing is the pattern. Theft disturbed confidence. Confidence held the system together, so theft had to be answered. A thief was not just a person who took. He was a warning. In a market town, stolen goods might pass from hand to hand with astonishing speed. A bronze blade becomes a bargain. A linen garment becomes a quiet exchange. A jar of oil changes ownership without a story attached. Officials trying to trace property had to move through speech, suspicion, and reputation. The object itself may have travelled farther than truth. There is something intimate about property in ancient Egypt. Objects are touched, used, repaired, inherited, and named in memory. A tool fits the hand of its owner. A garment carries the shape of a body. A basket may be known by its weaving. To steal is to enter someone's daily life without permission. The village understands this. By late afternoon, the court's patience thins. The accused may be ordered to bring forward proof. Witnesses may be questioned again. A storekeeper may be blamed for negligence. A watchman may discover that sleeping at the wrong hour is a career choice with consequences. The scribe remains calm because scribes have always known that panic is easier to manage when someone else is having it. A thin humour lingers there, but it fades quickly. There is fear in the lane tonight. Doors close earlier. People speak softly about the missing grain. A mother warns her child not to touch what belongs to another. A man checks his own storage jar twice. The crime has already done its work. It has made everyone imagine hunger, accusation, and punishment. You stand near the granary as the first stars appear. The sealed doorway has been repaired with fresh clay. An official mark presses into it, small and absolute. The mark says that order has returned. The mark says that someone is watching. The mark says that need does not erase authority. Yet somewhere in the village, a stomach is still empty. That is the sorrow beneath the law. Egypt could count grain with astonishing care, but counting did not always soften hunger. Justice could punish the thief, restore the seal, and record the outcome. It could not always explain why a person reached into darkness in the first place. The granary grows quiet again. Inside, the grain waits for hands permitted to touch it. Outside, the dust cools under the moon. And in that hush, the oldest crime in settled life remains close to the oldest fear. Someone has more. Someone has less. Someone watches the door. The room is smaller than you expect. Not a grand hall. Not a temple court painted with calm gods, but a hard, shaded chamber where the air has nowhere kind to go. It smells of dust, old rope, sweat, and the sour fear of people who have been waiting too long. A man kneels on the packed earth floor. His wrists are bound before him. Two officials stand nearby, speaking in low voices. A scribe sits close enough to hear everything, but far enough to avoid being touched by the desperation in the room. His reed pen waits. Truth is being invited to appear. It is not always invited gently. In ancient Egyptian legal practice, confession could matter greatly, especially in serious investigations involving theft, tomb robbery, conspiracy, or state property. The surviving records show questioning, repeated statements, witness comparison, and at times physical pressure. The words can look dry on papyrus, but behind them stands the body, A mainstream historical fact is preserved in famous records of tomb robbery investigations from the later New Kingdom. Scholars at the British Museum, the University of Chicago, and Oxford have examined papyri describing suspects being examined, questioned, and sometimes beaten during inquiry. The documents do not let the modern reader pretend that Egyptian justice was only ceremonial wisdom beneath painted stars. It had hands, it had sticks. You hear the first blow before you understand it, a flat crack, brief and ugly, against skin or muscle. The room tightens. Someone outside coughs and then becomes very quiet. The man on the floor gasps, then denies again. His denial seems smaller now, as if pain has already taken a share of it. The officials ask where the stolen goods went. He says he does not know. They ask who entered with him. He says he was not there. They ask why 2 witnesses saw him near the place. He says the witnesses lie. The scribe writes down the answers, and perhaps the changes between answers, because contradiction is a door that opens inward. This is the dark machinery of official truth. The purpose is not merely punishment. It is extraction, names, accomplices, locations, hidden goods, routes, motives, and confirmations. Authorities want a story that fits the evidence and restores control. A confession can tie the loose strands together. It can transform suspicion into record, rumour into guilt, and pain into administrative clarity. That is a terrible kind of efficiency. A quirky tidbit lies in the almost bureaucratic language of some harsh records. Even when the matter is brutal, the writing may remain orderly, formulaic, and calm. A man may be beaten, terrified, and questioned, while the document continues with neat phrasing and official sequence. Ancient paperwork could make suffering sound as if it had excellent manners. The scribe dips his pen again. He does not need to enjoy cruelty. That may be the more unsettling thought. Systems often do not require monsters at every desk. They require people who perform tasks, preserve forms, obey expectations, and call the result necessary. One man asks, another strikes. Another records. Another receives the report. Each carries only part of the weight. Together they make the weight unbearable. Your mind drifts toward the accused. Perhaps he's guilty. Perhaps he has hidden stolen copper beneath a floor. Perhaps he has taken cloth, grain, or temple property. Perhaps he belongs to a chain of thieves who know how to move goods through night and gossip. Perhaps his fear is the fear of exposure, or perhaps he is innocent. That possibility cannot leave the room. Pain changes speech. It can reveal. It can distort. It can make a guilty man name others. It can make an innocent man invent shadows to stop the blows. Modern scholars at Stanford, Yale, and other major institutions often note the danger of reading confession records too simply. The open scholarly debate centres on how much trust can be placed in statements obtained under force, and how often officials recognise the difference between truth and survival. The answer is not comforting. In a society that valued order, a confession had power because it seemed to close uncertainty. A named accomplice could be brought in. A hidden object might be recovered. A story could be written and sealed. But certainty born from suffering may carry a stain no ritual water can wash away. The chamber grows warmer. A fly circles the accused man's face. He cannot lift his hands to brush it away. This small humiliation may trouble you more than the official severity. The body becomes public property during interrogation. Its pain is used as a tool. Its reactions are watched, judged, and translated into meaning. He says name at last. The officials lean closer. The name is repeated. The scribe writes it. The accused man breathes hard, blinking sweat from his eyes. Did he tell the truth? Did he offer a rival, a friend, a brother, a man already suspected, a man safely absent? The room does not answer. It only moves forward. The new name creates another case. Egyptian interrogations in serious matters could branch like roots beneath a wall. One suspect names another. That person is seized, questioned, compared, and pressured. Stolen goods may be traced through households, workshops, boats, and markets. Each confession promises clarity, yet each also multiplies uncertainty. The more people speak under fear, the more the record fills with voices that may not be free. Still, officials often needed cooperation. Egypt's administration depended on knowledge: who moved goods, who guarded doors, who cut seals, who received payment, who kept silent. A crime hidden within a village or work crew could not be solved by authority alone. It needed insiders. Interrogation turned the community against itself. There is a deep loneliness in that. You imagine another man hearing footsteps outside his house before sunrise. His wife wakes first. A child sits up, confused. Officials enter with a name spoken in pain by someone else. The man protests. He knows nothing. Yet the accusation has already crossed the threshold. It sits in the house like smoke. The questioning room receives him by midday. This is how fear spreads. Not only through punishment, but through anticipation. People begin to wonder who might name them. A guilty person fears exposure. An innocent person fears usefulness. A disliked person fears convenience. The silence of neighbours becomes difficult to read. Shortly, even ordinary speech feels risky. The officials are not necessarily careless. They may compare accounts, inspect evidence, and question witnesses. They may seek consistency and recovery. Egyptian records reveal procedure, not mindless violence. Yet the presence of beating means that truth and coercion stand too close together, breathing the same hot air. A society may believe itself just while accepting pain as a path to truth. That belief is ancient. It is also stubbornly modern, though we prefer softer words for our discomfort. Perhaps that is why the chamber feels familiar in a way it should not. The accused man speaks again. His voice is rough now. He tells them where something was hidden, or where he claims it was hidden. Men are sent to search. The scribe pauses. Everyone waits inside the slow grinding of consequence. If the object is found, the confession hardens. If it is not found, the body may be asked again. There is no kindness in that phrase. Outside, sunlight fills the courtyard with impossible brightness. A servant pours water into a jar. A guard stretches his fingers. Somewhere, temple bells or rattles sound faintly in ritual rhythm. The world remains beautiful. That is often the cruelest detail. Pain does not stop the sun from touching the walls. By evening, the record may contain names, denials, admissions, and the marks of official certainty. It may say that a man confessed. It may say that he was examined. It may preserve the result, while leaving out the full sound of the room. Documents are like that. They keep the skeleton and lose the trembling. The dark truth of forced confession is not only that bodies were hurt, it is that the state could turn hurt into knowledge, then call that knowledge justice. A beaten answer might restore stolen goods. It might uncover accomplices. It might also bury doubt beneath the neat lines of a scribe. Night settles over the settlement. The questioning room is swept. The rope is coiled. The ink is stored. Officials leave with their documents, and the chamber becomes only a room again. But for the person who knelt there, the room does not empty so easily. Some places remain inside the body. The prison is not what your mind first tries to build. It is not a deep stone dungeon with iron doors and dripping walls. It is a courtyard, a guarded house, a work camp, a storage enclosure, a holding place near an office, or a space where movement is watched until authority decides what a body is worth. You stand near a low administrative building at the edge of a settlement. The morning air carries the smell of mud brick, stale water, animal hide, and cooked lentils. A guard sits in the shade with a bored face, which is somehow more frightening than anger. Anger passes. Boredom can last all day. A few detained men wait nearby. They are not all the same. One may be accused of theft, Another may owe labour. Another may be held until witnesses arrive. Another may be marked for transport to a place where punishment looks less like a cell and more like endless work beneath a hard sky. Ancient Egypt did know confinement, but not always in the modern sense of long prison sentences behind permanent bars. Detention often served a practical purpose. It held suspects before questioning, kept convicted people under control, gathered labourers, and managed those assigned to state work. The body was not always stored as punishment, sometimes it was redirected. Records from administrative archives and legal papyri confirm that people could be detained, guarded, transferred, and assigned to labour. Scholars at the University of Chicago, Oxford, and Yale have studied these traces, showing that Egyptian punishment often connected custody with work, repayment, and control. The state did not always need a prison if it could make a person useful. That is the mainstream fact, plain and rather cold. A person who has offended authority may find that punishment means being moved, away from family, away from familiar streets, away from the small protections of reputation. The Nile Valley is long, and distance can become its own wall. A guarded worker in a quarry, a field gang, or a remote project may technically stand beneath open sky. Yet freedom has left him. The sky can be a ceiling. Your feet follow a dusty road beyond the village. Men walk in a line, watched by guards. They carry tools, baskets, or nothing at all, which may be worse, because empty hands wait for orders. Their linen is rough, their shoulders are tense. A few glance back toward the houses, but not for long. Forced labour is not merely physical punishment, it is social removal. The person is taken out of ordinary life and placed inside the appetite of the state. Stone must be cut, canals must be cleared, fields must be worked, walls must be repaired, mines must be supplied. In a kingdom that builds, digs, hauls, and stores constantly, labour is never unwanted. A quirky tidbit rests in the strange variety of places where confinement might happen. Egypt could turn almost any controlled space into custody if enough guards, orders, and paperwork surrounded it. A person might not see iron bars, yet discover that every doorway belongs to someone else. Very efficient, very inconvenient for the prisoner. The ancient state did not always need dramatic architecture to limit human life. A scribe records names near a gate. His list matters more than the mud wall beside him. The guard may forget a face, but the list remembers who entered, who left, who was assigned, who failed to appear, who must be pursued. Writing becomes the invisible fence around the detained. Inside the holding area, men sit under a patch of shade. One whispers a complaint about food. Another stares at the ground. A third keeps repeating that his case is a mistake, though the others no longer respond. The first day of confinement is full of speech. The later days are quieter. Hope gets tired. You notice the difference between punishment as pain and punishment as waiting. Waiting softens a person at the edges. It loosens certainty. It makes the body listen for footsteps. A beating has a beginning and an end, however terrible. Waiting can spread across hours until the mind begins punishing itself. In some cases, detention may have been temporary, simply a way to ensure that accused persons remained available for questioning or judgment. In others, it could become part of a harsher process leading to transport, labour, or further penalty. The surviving documents do not always allow a clean distinction. Ancient paperwork is rarely as generous as curiosity wants it to be. An open scholarly debate continues among researchers at Stanford, Cambridge, and the Metropolitan Museum of Art over how to define prison in ancient Egypt. Some historians emphasize detention houses and guarded compounds. Others argue that punishment was more often expressed through labour assignment, bodily penalty, or exile rather than imprisonment as a final sentence. The debate matters because words shape what you imagine. Call it prison, and you see walls. Call it custody, and you see paperwork. Call it forced labour, and you see a road leading into heat. For the person inside the system, the difference may be less comforting. The essential fact is that someone else decides where your body may be. The day grows warmer. A guard pours water from a jar, drinks first, then passes what remains. The detained men take it carefully. Their dignity has to live in small movements now. The way they hold the cup, the way they do not beg, the way they avoid looking too desperate when footsteps approach. Nearby, a woman comes with bread wrapped in cloth. She asks to see her husband. The guard hesitates, enjoying his tiny kingdom for a moment. Officials may permit family contact, or they may not. The woman lowers her voice. She's brought food, and perhaps information, and perhaps the kind of pleading that leaves no written trace. The scribe might never record her tears. This is one of the hidden cruelties of administrative punishment. The document names the detained person, the charge, the assignment, the decision. It rarely names the wife walking home with an empty cloth. It rarely names the child asking when his father returns. The law acts on one body, but the household absorbs the sentence. In Egypt, households are economic units as much as emotional ones. Remove a worker, and fields suffer. Remove a craftsman, and tools lie still. Remove a father, mother, son, or servant, and labour must be replaced by someone already tired. Punishment moves outward like water from a dropped stone. The holding place becomes quieter in the afternoon. Heat presses the smell of bodies into the walls. A fly finds every face. Someone mutters a prayer. Someone else laughs once, without joy, at a joke nobody can quite hear. Humour survives in strange places, mostly because misery dislikes being alone. Their names are called A Few Men Stand. They are to be taken south, perhaps to a work site, perhaps to an estate, perhaps to a place named in the document but unknown to their feet. Their punishment has changed shape. It is no longer waiting. It is motion. The road receives them. You walk beside them in imagination, past canals, palms, fields, and villages where other people continue living ordinary lives. A woman kneads dough. A boy drives geese with a stick. A priest washes at sunrise. The punished men pass through this normal world like shadows that everyone tries not to study too closely. Forced labour under royal or institutional control could be severe, especially in remote or harsh environments. Quarrying stone, mining in desert regions, and heavy agricultural work placed enormous strain on bodies. Punishment did not always need to kill quickly. It could consume slowly, one task at a time. The guard staff taps the ground. Dust rises around ankles. The state has turned guilt, debt, suspicion, or disorder into movement and work. That transformation is the dark centre of custody here. A confined person is not merely hidden from society. He is made available to power. His time is taken. His strength is counted. His future is narrowed to command. As evening lowers, the holding area behind you receives new bodies. The same shade, the same wall, the same list waiting for fresh names. No iron door closes with a cinematic clang. No deep dungeon swallows the guilty. Instead, a guard yawns, a scribe writes, and a person discovers that freedom can disappear without ceremony. The prison without bars is still a prison. It is built from orders, distance, hunger, labour, and watched roads. It is built from the knowledge that tomorrow belongs to someone else. And under the calm Egyptian stars, the detained man lies awake, not behind iron, but inside a sentence that has learned to breathe. The sentence is spoken in a voice that does not tremble. That is what makes it terrible. The official does not rage. He does not need to. Around him, the courtyard is still, and the people gathered there understand that a calm command can break a life more completely than shouting. You feel the heat on the back of your neck. The ground is pale and hard beneath your feet. A few officials stand beneath a strip of shade. A guard holds the condemned person by the arm. Nearby, a scribe waits with his palette, because even pain must be recorded properly. The punishment is not always death. Sometimes it's survival change beyond recognition. Ancient Egyptian punishments could include mutilation, branding, beating, exile, forced labour, and public disgrace, depending on period, crime, status, and circumstance. Modern scholars at Oxford, Yale, and the University of Chicago have studied references to such penalties in legal texts, royal decrees, and narrative traditions. The evidence does not form a tidy law code, but it reveals a society where the body could become a document. That is the mainstream fact, and it is difficult to hold gently. The body could be marked so that guilt remained visible, a nose removed, ears cut, skin branded, a person sent away under a new shadow. These punishments did not only cause pain, they announced that the punished person had been judged, reduced, and made permanently legible to others. In a world without photographs, identity lived on the face. So imagine the horror of losing that face. The nose is not merely flesh, it is profile, dignity, breath, recognition, and social presence. To remove it is to make punishment impossible to hide. Every market visit becomes a reminder. Every stare becomes a second sentence. Every child asking a careless question becomes another small blade. The punishment walks with you. For a moment, the courtyard seems to narrow. You hear a bird call from a roofline. You smell dust, sun-warmed rope, and the faint sweetness of date wine from a nearby jar. The condemned person stares ahead, perhaps trying to remain inside himself. There are punishments that begin by attacking the body, then spend years attacking the mind. A quirky tidbit appears in the strange geography of exile. Some Egyptian punishments sent offenders to border zones, desert edges, or fortress communities where distance became discipline. To modern ears, exile may sound almost poetic, like a sad journey under stars. In practice, being removed from your village could mean losing food networks, kinship protection, reputation, and every neighbour who knew your name. Romantic as it was not, exile could erase a person without killing him. That may be why it frightened people so deeply. Death ends the visible argument. Exile continues it in absence. The family left behind must answer questions. The household loses labour. The name becomes uncomfortable in conversation. A person can be alive and still become socially buried. You walk now toward the edge of cultivated land. Fields lie behind you, green with irrigation. Ahead, the desert brightens like a warning. The line between black soil and pale sand is sharp, almost moral. Egypt loved that line. Fertility on one side, dryness on the other, belonging on one side, exposure on the other. To be sent outward was to feel the land itself become accusation. Some offenders may have been assigned to harsh labour far from home, where survival depended on obedience, endurance, and the favour of guards. Others might be marked and kept within society as living examples. The punishment chosen could depend on the crime. Sacred theft, rebellion, severe assault, official corruption, and repeated offences could draw different responses. Yet the meaning often overlapped. Authority wanted the punished body to teach. A branded person carried a message through public space. The mark said that the state had touched him and left proof. Branding could define status, ownership, criminality, or forced assignment, depending on context. It made the skin participate in administration. That sentence sounds almost absurd until you picture the iron, the heat, the smell. The smell is the part records do not keep. Written sources are usually careful, official, and selective. They may say what was done or what should be done without lingering over the human details. They do not tell you who looked away. They do not tell you whether the condemned person cried out, fainted, cursed, or remained silent with frightening strength. They do not tell you who slept poorly afterward. Perhaps no one did. The thought is worse. An open scholarly debate continues among researchers at Stanford as Cambridge and major museum collections over how frequently mutilation was actually used rather than threatened. Some texts may preserve ideal penalties, exceptional cases, or royal warnings. Other evidence suggests real bodily punishment formed part of judicial practice, especially when authority wished to make disorder visible. This matters because fear can work even when punishment is rare. A penalty does not need to happen every day to shape behaviour. It only needs to be remembered clearly. A single punished face in a village can govern the imagination for years. People tell the story in lowered voices. Children hear pieces of it. Adults adjust their choices. The law enters the body of the community. You stand in a narrow street as such a person passes. Conversation thins. A woman lowers her eyes. A man pretends to inspect a wall. Children stare until their mother sharply pulls them back. The punished person carries bread under one arm, because even the marked must eat. Life continues around him with unbearable ordinariness. That ordinariness is part of the cruelty. If a person is executed, society turns the page quickly. If a person is mutilated and allowed to remain, the page is never fully turned. Each appearance refreshes the judgment. Forgiveness becomes difficult when punishment is attached to the face. The crime may fade in memory, but the mark remains louder than any explanation. Ancient Egyptian justice was deeply concerned with the restoration of order, yet some punishments made disorder permanent within a human life. A cut nose did not grow back when balance returned. A brand did not vanish when the stolen goods were repaid. Exile did not restore the household it emptied. So what kind of balance was this? Perhaps it was balance for the state, not the soul. Perhaps it was a warning placed above mercy. Perhaps officials believed the visible wound protected many by frightening them away from crime. That logic is ancient, simple, and brutal. Hurt one person clearly enough and others may behave. The night wind moves through dry reeds. A family sits inside a mud brick house, speaking quietly about a relative sent away. They do not know if he reached the assigned place. They do not know if he is sick, hungry, or already dead beyond the reach of the messages. There is no grand announcement now, only absence. His mat remains rolled. His cup sits unused. His name has become heavy. Exile punishes space. Mutilation punishes recognition. Branding punishes memory. Together, these penalties reveal a justice system that understood something intimate about human life. People do not only fear pain, they fear shame, separation, and being seen forever through one terrible event. A punishment aimed at status can outlive a punishment aimed at flesh. The official in the courtyard may never say this aloud. He may speak only of the crime and the sentence. He may invoke order, royal authority, sacred duty, and the need to restrain wrongdoing. Those words matter in his world. They may even be sincerely believed. But the condemned person hears something simpler. You will not be who you were. That is the core of such punishment. It takes identity and bends it into warning. It tells the village that crime can remove more than comfort. It can remove face, home, name, and future. It can leave a living person standing among the living as a sign of what authority can do. The sun lowers behind the western cliffs. Shadows stretch across the settlement. The courtyard empties, but its memory remains in the dust. Somewhere, a scribe dries the record. Somewhere, the marked person touches his own skin in disbelief. Somewhere, a family begins learning how silence sounds when hope is afraid to speak. And above it all, the stars appear with their ancient indifference. They shine over temples, fields, prisons, palaces, and lonely roads into the desert. They shine over the punished and the powerful alike. Yet only one of them must wake tomorrow carrying the sentence on the body. The tomb mouth opens into darkness like a wound in the cliff. Outside, the desert is cold beneath the stars, though the day's heat still sleeps inside the stone. You stand near the entrance and feel the silence pressing forward, old and watchful, as if the dead have been listening for footsteps. A small flame trembles in a worker's lamp. The light touches painted walls, broken plaster, scattered dust, and the edge of a sealed passage that should not have been touched by living hands. Somewhere deeper within, a burial chamber waits with its jars, chests, amulets, linen wrappings, and sacred protections. Every object has a purpose. Every spell has a place. Then comes the hand with the chisel. Tomb robbery was not ordinary theft in ancient Egypt. It reached into religion, memory, royal authority, family honour, and the imagined survival of the dead. To steal grain from a storehouse was serious. To steal from a tomb was to invade eternity. And that made the crime feel colder than mere greed. Records confirm that tomb robbery investigations became especially intense during the later New Kingdom. The famous robbery papyri, studied by scholars at the British Museum, Oxford, and the University of Chicago, preserve trials, accusations, interrogations, confessions, and lists of stolen treasures. These documents show that officials treated sacred theft as a grave assault on both property and cosmic order. The thief is not simply taking gold. He is touching the future of a soul. You move through a narrow passage where the air is stale and mineral dry. The ceiling presses low. A painted goddess extends protective wings along the wall, but her calm gaze now watches damage. A corner has been hacked open. A chest has been forced. Linen has been disturbed by hands searching for gold amulets between the wrappings. This is where the crime becomes intimate. The robber does not only steal from the dead king, noble, priest, or official. He interrupts the careful work of embalmers, mourners, priests, and family members. He tears through years of belief in one hurried night. Even when the body remains mostly intact, the axe stains the boundary between the living and the dead. A quirky tidbit emerges from the investigations themselves. Some tomb robbers sound less like mysterious villains and more like tired workers. Local officials, craftsmen, guards, and opportunists who knew exactly where wealth might be hidden. The underworld of theft was not always outside society. Sometimes it wore the face of society itself. That is what makes it unsettling. The people who knew tombs best were often the people best placed to violate them. Workmen understood chambers, seals, tools, burial layouts, and the weak places in stone. Guards knew routines, officials knew inventories, priests knew rituals. A tomb was protected by holiness, but holiness still needed human honesty, which has never been the most reliable building material. You hear whispers in the night. One man holds the lamp, another chips at a sealed wall, a third waits near the entrance, listening for movement on the path. They are frightened, but not frightened enough to stop. Gold has a strange talent for arguing with the conscience. It speaks softly, then very persuasively. Perhaps they tell themselves the owner is dead. Perhaps they tell themselves the priests already took their share. Perhaps they believe the gods are far away tonight. Humans are gifted at making crimes sound temporary. Eternity, however, is a difficult witness to ignore. When robbery is discovered, authority responds with alarm. Inspectors enter tombs. Damage is recorded. Bodies and chambers are examined. Suspects are named. Goods may be traced through houses, workshops, and markets. A stolen bracelet can become evidence. A lump of gold can become a sentence. A frightened wife may discover that treasure hidden beneath a floor is not as quiet as promised. The village becomes tense. People remember who had sudden wealth. They remember who bought extra bread, drank too freely, or paid an old debt with suspicious confidence. In small communities, prosperity needs an explanation. A man who was poor yesterday should be careful if he glitters today. The robbery papyri preserve a world of accusation and fear. Officials call suspects forward. Witnesses speak. Confessions are compared. Some accused men deny involvement. Others admit entering tombs and dividing goods. The records can be strangely vivid, not because they offer every detail, but because they allow you to hear the pressure of investigation tightening. An open scholarly debate continues among researchers at Yale, Cambridge, and major museum collections over how widespread official corruption was in tomb robbery cases. Some evidence suggests thieves acted with help from guards or administrators. Other interpretations warn that accusations of corruption may reflect crisis, rivalry, or later political blame. The surviving records illuminate the problem, but not every hidden hand. Still, the suspicion lingers. How could so many tombs be violated unless someone looked away? How could valuable objects move without protection failing? How could sacred spaces be broken unless hunger, greed, unpaid wages, or institutional weakness had entered the system? Tomb robbery becomes a mirror held to Egypt's troubled heart. It reveals cracks behind the gold. You stand now inside an official inquiry. A suspect's face shines with sweat. He insists he only watched from outside. Another man says they entered together. A third claims the stolen silver was divided in a courtyard. The scribe writes, "The officials listen with growing impatience. Each answer drags another person into the net. The crime is no longer hidden underground. It is spreading through testimony. Sacred theft could bring harsh punishment because it betrayed more than property rights. Tomb goods were meant to sustain the dead and honour the social rank of the buried person. Royal tombs were even more charged, bound to the prestige of kingship. To rob such a place suggested not only poverty or greed, but a world-losing fear. That may be what frightened officials most. A society can endure thieves. It struggles when thieves no longer fear the sacred. If workers, guards, or villagers believe tombs are simply treasure houses waiting in the dark, then a deep moral boundary has failed. Punishment must repair not only loss, but awe. The accused may be beaten for answers. He may name accomplices. He may be sentenced to death, forced labour, mutilation, or other severe penalties, depending on the case and authority involved. The documents do not always satisfy modern curiosity with perfect clarity. They give enough to chill the skin and leave the rest to silence. Inside the tomb, scattered fragments remain: a broken jar, a torn wrapping, a bead missed in the dust, a painted eye on the wall, still staring. These remnants feel more sorrowful than piles of gold. They show the crude speed of a robbery, sacred order, built slowly by ritual, undone by hurried hands and desperate breath. The dead cannot defend themselves, so the living punish in their name. Yet even here, the moral picture refuses to stay simple. Some tomb robbers may have been hungry labourers in periods of unpaid wages and political strain. Others were greedy men exploiting sacred trust. Some may have worked with officials who profited quietly. Some may have been accused because someone powerful needed a culprit. The darkness inside the tomb continues into the records. Justice tries to speak clearly, but history hears echoes. At dawn, the cliffs turn pink with light. Guards stand at tomb entrances. Inspectors seal damaged chambers. The valley looks peaceful again, almost innocent. But beneath the stone, the dead have been disturbed, and above the stone, the living are afraid. The dark truth of tomb robbery is not only that criminals entered sacred places, it is that the crime reveals a moment when belief, poverty, greed, and authority collided underground. The tomb was meant to defeat time. Instead, it became evidence. The lamp burns low. Dust settles over broken plaster. Somewhere, a scribe finishes the record, naming men who entered where they should not have gone. Their punishment may satisfy the court, but the silence beyond the chamber remains uneasy. Perhaps that is why tomb robbery still troubles the mind. It is not merely theft from the dead. It is the living admitting in secret that even eternity has a door. The doorway is half open, and that small gap holds more tension than a locked gate. Inside the house, shadows lie across storage jars, folded linen, wooden stools, and a sleeping mat that has not been rolled away. Outside, neighbours pretend to pass by for ordinary reasons. which is one of the oldest performances in human history. You stand close enough to hear lowered voices. A woman speaks first. Her tone is controlled, but every word has an edge beneath it. She says a bracelet has vanished. She says her husband's sister entered the house while she was grinding grain. She says everyone knows this sister has wanted trouble since the funeral because grief, unfortunately, does not always improve family character. A household accusation begins. In ancient Egypt, justice did not belong only to palaces, temples, and official courts. It entered rooms where bread was baked, children were raised, servants slept, and property was stored in jars or wooden chests. Many conflicts grew from domestic life, including inheritance, marriage arrangements, adultery claims, debt, ownership, abuse, and disputes between relatives. Records confirm that women in ancient Egypt could own property, make legal agreements, bring complaints, serve as witnesses, and defend inheritance claims. Researchers at Yale, Oxford, and the University of Chicago have studied contracts and court records showing women acting with legal agency, especially compared with many other ancient societies. This does not mean life was equal or easy, but it does mean women appear in the legal record with striking force. That fact changes the room. The woman at the doorway is not merely an ornament in someone else's case. She can speak, she can accuse, she can call witnesses, she can invoke agreements, property claims, and family obligations. Her voice may still face pressure from status, wealth, gender expectations, and household politics. But the legal world does not render her silent. Silence would have been convenient. Instead, she names names. The official listens while the accused relative protests with theatrical innocence. The neighbours enjoy this far more than they should. Someone at the back quietly adjusts a shawl, hoping no one asks what she saw. The missing bracelet becomes more than metal. It becomes memory, status, dowry, inheritance, and family insult wound into one bright circle. A quirky tidbit appears in the emotional messiness of household disputes. Some ancient records show people arguing over objects that seem small, until you remember that a single chest, garment, mirror, or piece of jewellery could carry years of labour and meaning. Ancient domestic justice often feels like watching a family group chat carved into eternity, only with more sandals and fewer apologies. The house smells of cumin, dust, old wood, and warm bread. A child stands behind a storage jar, wide-eyed, learning that adults can turn love into litigation with impressive speed. An elderly man sits on a stool, pretending to be neutral. His face suggests he has chosen a side but prefers not to be struck by either. Family conflict is its own court. Inheritance disputes could be especially bitter. Property did not vanish with the dead. It had to pass into living hands, and living hands are rarely as holy as funeral prayers pretend. A field share, a house, a servant, a chest of linen, a metal vessel, or a few animals could become the centre of accusation. Who was promised what? Who heard the promise? Who has the document? Who conveniently lost it? In a society that valued written agreements, family memory still mattered. A mother might claim that a daughter had been given goods during marriage. A son might insist that a brother had already received his share. A widow might defend her right to remain in a house against relatives who suddenly developed a deep interest in architectural ownership. The officials ask for witnesses. The room changes again. A neighbour who heard a conversation must decide how much courage she owns. A servant may know too much and be trusted too little. A relative may speak with passion and very limited fairness. The scribe watches all of them, preserving their words with the cold patience of someone who will not be invited to the next family meal. Adultery accusations carried another kind of danger. They touched honour, household stability, inheritance certainty, and social trust. Ancient Egyptian literary and legal sources suggest that sexual misconduct could be punished harshly in certain contexts, especially when it threatened household order. Yet the evidence is uneven, and caution is needed. An open scholarly debate continues among historians at Stanford, Cambridge, and major museum collections over how often adultery was punished formally rather than handled through divorce, property settlement, or household pressure. Some stories portray severe penalties. Some legal materials emphasize practical consequences. The truth may have shifted across time, class, and local custom. This uncertainty matters because private life leaves fragmentary evidence. People do not always take their most humiliating problems to officials. Some disputes are settled through family pressure, compensation, separation, threats, or silence. The court record preserves cases that surfaced, not every wound that remained indoors. Ancient homes, like modern ones, contained many truths that never became documents. You hear a different accusation now. A man claims his wife has betrayed him with another man. His voice is loud enough to gather listeners. The woman denies it, pale with anger. The alleged lover looks as if he would happily become a small lizard and escape through the wall. No such luck appears available. Honor fills the room like smoke. The officials know that such claims can destroy lives even before judgment. A false accusation may damage a woman's reputation. A true one may fracture a household. A convenient one may help a husband in a property dispute. A jealous one may arise from rumour, envy, or injured pride. The difficulty is not only discovering what happened, it is discovering why the accusation is happening now. Domestic justice is rarely cleaned. The household is where affection, labour, money, desire, resentment, and duty sleep under the same roof. When conflict breaks open, it carries all those things together. A missing bracelet may really be about inheritance. A debt claim may really be about humiliation. An adultery charge may really be about control. The stated crime may be only the visible tip of a buried quarrel. Still, officials must decide something. They may order repayment. They may recognize property rights. They may confirm an agreement. They may punish theft, false testimony, or misconduct. They may accept oaths, documents, and witness statements. Their judgment aims to restore practical order, though emotional order may remain stubbornly ruined. A woman places a document before them. The papyrus is worn at the edge. It carries names, obligations, and the memory of an agreement older than the current quarrel. The accused relative frowns at it. Documents have a rude habit of surviving exactly when people hoped they would not. The scribe examines it carefully, perhaps appreciating the work of another scribe across years. Ink becomes a voice from the past. This is one reason legal agency mattered. Written agreements could give a woman leverage against relatives, husbands, or officials who might otherwise dismiss her claim. Not always enough, not perfectly, but enough to matter in many cases. The document makes her accusation harder to sweep into the dust. Outside, the neighbours pretend not to celebrate. In another house, a servant girl is questioned about missing goods. Her low status places her in danger before she speaks. She may know the truth, yet her words may be weighed differently from those of free household members. Social rank shapes credibility. So does dependence. If her owner is involved, truth may stand in a very narrow room. The legal system hears people, but not equally. That is one of its oldest shadows. Children, servants, foreigners, labourers, wives, widows, craftsmen, and officials all stood differently before authority. Some could call on kin, documents, reputation, or patronage. Others had only a frightened voice, and perhaps a witness willing to risk involvement. Domestic justice exposed the hidden architecture of power inside ordinary life. The sun lowers, and the house grows amber with evening light. The bracelet may be found wrapped in cloth behind a jar, or perhaps it never returns. The accusation may be proven, withdrawn, redirected, or left like a thorn beneath the family skin. The court may end the case, but it cannot make people love one another again. That is beyond administration. A final witness speaks, quietly. She says she saw the accused leave with something hidden beneath her garment. The accused gasps. The woman at the doorway closes her eyes for a moment, not in victory, but in exhaustion. Justice, when it arrives inside a household, rarely feels triumphant. It feels like air after a storm that broke the roof. You step back into the lane. Cooking smoke rises. A dog scratches at fleas. A man laughs too loudly nearby, hoping to show he knows nothing. Behind the walls, families resume their careful lives, counting objects, guarding promises, watching relatives, and sleeping beside unresolved memories. The dark truth here is intimate. Pharaoh's justice did not only punish criminals in public places, it entered bedrooms, kitchens, storerooms, marriages, and mourning rituals. It listened to grief disguised as evidence and evidence sharpened by grief. Inside the ancient home, guilt could smell like bread, linen, incense, and old resentment. And sometimes, the most dangerous witness was not an enemy at all, but someone who once knew where everything was kept. The palace at night does not sleep like a village sleeps. It listens. Lamps burn behind carved screens. Guards stand where corridors bend. Servants move with careful feet, carrying oil, water, linen, and secrets that are heavier than any jar. You stand near the edge of the royal household, where polished floors catch the flamelight. The air smells of incense, wax smoke, cedar wood, and the faint bitterness of medicine. Somewhere beyond the walls, the river moves in darkness. Inside, every whisper seems to know it may become evidence. Treason begins differently from other crimes. It does not steal a bracelet, a basket of grain, or a copper blade. It reaches toward the living heart of the state. It imagines the king vulnerable. It thinks the unthinkable inside a system built on the idea that the pharaoh stands at the center of order. That is why palace conspiracy carries such terror. It does not merely threaten a man. It threatens the story that makes everyone obey. The Golden House is beautiful. Beauty does not make it safe. A mainstream historical fact stands in one of Egypt's most famous criminal cases, the conspiracy against Rameses III. Ancient judicial papyri studied by scholars at the University of Chicago, Oxford, and major museum collections describe an investigation into a plot involving members of the royal household, officials, and women connected to the harem. The records show special courts, named defendants, verdicts, and severe punishments. The case feels almost too human. There is ambition. There is family rivalry. There is fear around succession. There are officials who listen too closely, servants who carry messages, and people who believe power might change hands if enough doors open quietly. The palace becomes less like a shining monument and more like a house full of locked rooms where everyone knows more than they should. Your mind drifts into a chamber where a queen or royal woman waits behind a screen. She is not weak in this world. Whatever later imaginations may prefer, palace women could hold influence, property, networks, and proximity to power. Proximity is not the same as authority, but in a court, proximity can be dangerous. A word at the right hour may travel farther than an army. A quirky tidbit rises from the strange materials of the conspiracy. Some accounts suggest that magic, wax figures, spells, and ritual objects may have played a role in the wider accusations. To modern ears, this can sound theatrical, almost like someone brought a haunted craft table to a political crisis. Yet in ancient Egypt, ritual action could be taken seriously as a force that harmed, protected, or altered reality. Politics and magic were not always strangers. If a person sought to weaken the king through ritual means, the act could be treated as real aggression. The invisible world mattered. Words mattered. Images mattered. A figure shaped in wax could be more than symbolism to those who believed form and power were linked. The crime was not silly to them. It was another weapon. The investigation moves like a shadow through the palace. Names are gathered. Doors are watched. Messages are recalled. Officials who once looked confident now speak carefully. The accused are not common thieves who can be dragged through a village lane without consequence. They belong close to power. Some may be judges, officers, scribes, servants, or household insiders. The danger is that the system must punish people who understand the system. That makes everything more tense. A special court may be formed, judges are appointed, testimony is heard. The accused stand before authority, but authority itself feels wounded. The crime has entered the palace skin. When treason is investigated, the question is never only who is guilty, it is also who can still be trusted. Trust becomes rare. The records of the Ramesses conspiracy include severe outcomes, with some defendants condemned to death and others allowed or compelled to take their own lives. Some judges were themselves punished for misconduct during the proceedings. This detail matters because it reveals how fear can contaminate even the court meant to restore order. Justice trembles inside crisis. An open scholarly debate continues among researchers at Yale, Cambridge, and other leading institutions over the political meaning of the conspiracy. Some historians see a succession struggle centered on royal family factions. Others emphasize palace administration, personal ambition, and instability near the end of a long reign. The evidence survives in official language, which may reveal truth while also protecting the image of royal order. Official records rarely confess panic. They prefer procedure. You stand now in a hall where the accused wait. Their linen garments are clean, but their faces are not calm. One man stares at the floor. Another keeps his chin high, perhaps from pride, perhaps because he has no other dignity left. A woman's hands are folded so tightly that her knuckles pale. The torches hiss softly in the night air. The charges are heavy. Plotting against the king, speaking with conspirators, carrying messages, using forbidden ritual knowledge, failing to report treason, helping those who wish to replace the royal heir. Each accusation does more than describe an act. It places the accused outside loyalty, outside obedience, outside the protected circle of the king's world. The penalty can be absolute. Execution is not only removal. In treason, it is cleansing. The conspirator must be cut away so the royal body can appear whole again. Yet even death may not be the only punishment. Names can be changed in records, reputations destroyed, bodies denied honour, families stained, and memory shaped into warning. To ancient Egyptians, memory mattered deeply. A person hoped to be named after death, remembered, offered to, and kept alive through ritual speech. To damage a name was a terrible extension of punishment. It reached beyond the last breath. In a culture where the afterlife required recognition, disgrace could become spiritual danger. The palace understands this. A condemned conspirator may fear not only pain, but erasure, not only dying, but being remembered as enemy, traitor, poison in the royal house. The shame may fall upon relatives, servants, associates, and anyone who stood too near. Treason spreads guilt by proximity, because fear does not draw delicate boundaries. Some accused people may be guilty, some may be foolish, some may be peripheral, pulled into the circle by rumour, duties, fear, or silence. A palace plot creates many degrees of involvement, but a frightened state may prefer clear categories: loyal or disloyal, clean or corrupted, safe or dangerous. Nuance is often the first prisoner. In the silence between hearings, you hear the scratch of pens again. Scribes list names. They preserve verdicts. They write in a tone that suggests the world is being repaired. Yet every word also proves that the world was fragile enough to need repair. A conspiracy record is an official victory over disorder, but it is also a confession that disorder reached the royal bedchambers. That is the hidden wound. The Pharaoh is presented as divine, victorious, chosen, and stabilizing. But a palace conspiracy reveals human weakness behind the screen. Old age, succession anxiety, rival children, ambitious officials, resentful insiders. The king may be cosmic in image, yet the palace still contains jealousy, calculation, and very tired servants carrying trays at midnight. History has a dry sense of humour. The punishments that follow are meant to seal the breach. The guilty are destroyed, removed, or shamed. The court reasserts command. The royal line continues if it can. The temple inscriptions remain confident. The official story returns to order, as official stories are trained to do, but something has been exposed. The law against treason reveals the greatest fear of absolute power, not invasion from the desert, not thieves in granaries, not even tomb robbers with guilty hands. The deepest fear is betrayal from within, from those close enough to know where the doors are, who guards them, and which whispers pass unnoticed. Outside the palace, dawn slowly gathers over the Nile. Birds call from the reeds, bakers stir fires. The city begins another day, perhaps unaware of every name spoken in judgment during the night. The public will hear only what authority allows. That is how palaces survive. They open like temples and close like fists. Inside, the torches burn low. The conspirators, proven or accused, move toward their sentences. Some face death. Some face disgrace. Some vanish into the dry language of records, their private motives thin into official guilt, their hopes, fears, resentments, and bargains become a cautionary shape preserved for later eyes. The dark truth of treason is that Pharaoh's justice grows most severe when the throne feels mortal. The king may be called eternal, but the court knows better. Bodies age, sons compete, servants listen, doors open, knives, words, and rituals can travel quietly through beautiful rooms. And so the palace watches itself. Every lamp becomes an eye, every whisper becomes a possible crime, every loyal face must be believed, doubted, and watched again. Beneath the gold, beneath the incense, beneath the careful hymns praising eternal rule, the royal house carries a secret knowledge. Power is never more afraid than when it's surrounded by its own people. The border does not feel like the gentle Egypt of painted tomb walls. It feels harsher, wider, and less forgiving. The green fields grow thinner behind you, while ahead the land opens into dust, stone, glare, and distance. A fortress rises near the road, square and watchful, its walls holding heat long after sunset. You hear leather creak. A soldier shifts his spear from one hand to the other. His eyes move across the horizon, where travellers, merchants, messengers, raiders, and frightened captives may all appear as small shapes in shimmering light. At the edge of the kingdom, justice changes its voice. It becomes shorter. It becomes harder. It has fewer neighbours to impress and more dangers to imagine. Borders make suspicion practical. In Egypt, military justice served the needs of command. Soldiers had to obey orders, guard routes, control labour, protect storehouses, escort prisoners, and respond to threats. Discipline could not move slowly when a caravan vanished, a patrol failed, or a fortress commander feared attack. In such places, hesitation could look like weakness, and weakness could invite disaster. Records and inscriptions studied by scholars at Yale, Oxford, and the University of Chicago confirm that Egypt maintained garrisons, frontier forts, military expeditions, and systems for handling captives and labourers, fortresses in Nubia, desert stations, and border posts show that the state watched movement carefully. Justice at the edge of empire was tied to security, transport, and control. That fact is important. A soldier who deserts does not merely abandon work. He leaves a gap in the wall. A guard who sleeps may endanger stores, prisoners, and messengers. A commander who lies about supplies can starve men far from help. Military punishment therefore protects hierarchy before it protects comfort. The army cannot function if every man negotiates obedience like a market price. The fortress smells of dust, sweat, bronze, old grain, and animal dung. Inside its walls, men sleep in cramped quarters. They mend sandals, they sharpen blades, they complain about rations with the ancient dignity of soldiers everywhere. Someone scratches a name into a beam, because even on the edge of empire, people want proof that boredom happened to them personally. A quirky tidbit appears in the ordinary life of these outposts. Archaeologists have found traces of food, letters, tools, and daily routines around frontier zones, reminding researchers that soldiers were not only warriors, they were hungry men, tired men, homesick men, and occasionally men who probably believed a missing ration was a crime against civilization itself. They may not have been wrong. Rations mattered, or a soldier paid in grain, bread, beer, cloth, or other provisions depended on the administrative chain. Theft or corruption in military supplies could become a serious offence because it weakened the garrison. Hunger turns discipline brittle. A hungry guard watches poorly. A cheated unit mutters dangerously. The state knew this, and so did every man counting bread. You stand near a supply room while an officer inspects jars. The seals are checked. The measures are compared. A scribe notes what has arrived and what has gone missing. One jar is lighter than expected. A soldier avoids eye contact. Another suddenly becomes fascinated by the wall. The inquiry begins. Military justice might involve beating, confinement, forced labour, loss of rank, or execution in severe cases. Although the evidence varies by period and setting, the key principle is obedience under pressure. Civilian courts could move through disputes and testimony. Frontier discipline often had to answer danger immediately, with the commander acting as judge, organiser, and symbol of royal force. The frontier compresses authority. Here, a commander may be the closest living representative of Pharaoh's power. The palace is far away, the river towns are far away. The temples of the capital are only names carried in memory. A written order from the centre may take time to arrive, but a guard asleep at the gate is a problem right now. So punishment happens near the place where fear rises. A man caught stealing from a military store may be tied, struck, questioned, and reassigned. A deserter may be pursued and dragged back in humiliation. A captive who attempts escape may face harsher restraint or worse. The border is a place where freedom is watched most intensely because movement itself is political. Who may pass? Who must stay? Who belongs inside the ordered land, and who stands beyond it? Captives bring another darkness into the story. Egyptian reliefs often show foreign prisoners bound by the arms, kneeling beneath the king, or presented as tribute after campaign. Such scenes are symbolic, but they reflect real practices of taking enemies, relocating people, assigning labour, and displaying victory. Captives could become workers, servants, dependents, or political signs. The punished enemy body became royal evidence. You imagine a line of captives moving through desert light. Their wrists are bound, their clothing is dusty. Some are soldiers, some may be civilians swept into the consequences of campaign. A child stumbles and is pulled upright by an older woman. The guards do not need to hate them, they only need to keep them moving. That is often enough. An open scholarly debate continues among researchers at Stanford and Cambridge, and major museum collections over how to interpret Egyptian images of bound enemies. Some scholars see them as ideological formulas exaggerating royal dominance. Others argue that they still preserve evidence for real captivity, deportation, and forced labour. The truth likely moves between art, propaganda, and lived suffering. On temple walls, the enemy is simplified. In life, the enemy had a name. That difference matters. The carved captive exists to prove that Egypt triumphs over disorder. The living captive feels thirst, fear, and confusion. He may not understand the language of his guards. He may not know where he is being taken. He may become labour for a building project, an estate, or a military installation. His punishment is displacement wrapped in victory. The soldier guarding him is also trapped in a system of command. He may pity the captive, he may despise him, he may think only of the march, the heat, and the officer watching from behind. Military justice bends everyone toward obedience, though not equally. The captive has least choice. The soldier has more, but not enough to forget the stick above him. A frontier fort after sunset is full of uneasy sounds. Sand brushes against the wall, a tethered animal stamps, men cough in their sleep, a guard walks the parapet, counting steps to stay awake. Beyond the wall, darkness seems alive, and every small noise becomes a possible approach. In such a place, punishment is also performance. If one man is punished for sleeping at his post, others remain awake. If one deserter is beaten before the unit, others remember the road is not as open as it looks. If captives are bound and counted publicly, everyone sees the state's hand closing. Discipline is taught through bodies because bodies are difficult to ignore. The morning brings inspection. Soldiers gather in rows, linen creased, faces tired, eyes narrowed against sunlight. The officer reads orders. A man accused of striking a superior is called forward. Another is charged with stealing provisions. A third has left his assigned watch. The punishments are announced without drama, which somehow deepens their force. The sun is very bright. No one jokes now. The border has little patience for elaborate excuses. A man may explain that he was sick, that the ration was already spoiled, that another soldier lied, that he only stepped away for water. Some explanations may be accepted. Others may die in the dust. Military command cannot afford endless softness, and that practical truth can become cruelty with surprising ease. You can sense how fear protects the fortress. You can also sense what it costs. Every soldier must carry not only weapons, but the knowledge that his own commanders may punish him swiftly. Every captive must carry the knowledge that escape may bring worse suffering. Every official must carry the anxiety that lost supplies or failed reports could rise upward through the administration. The border makes everyone answerable to distance, danger, and suspicion. When the patrol leaves, the gate opens with a wooden groan. Men step into the pale morning beyond the wall. Their shadows stretch ahead of them like dark ropes. The Nile's green promise is far behind. Here, justice no longer smells of ink and household smoke. It smells of leather, salt, dust, and fear drying on the skin. The dark truth of military punishment is that it reveals Egypt as more than a river civilization of fields and temples. It was also a guarded power, holding roads, mines, borders, captives, and soldiers beneath command. Order at the centre depended on discipline at the edge. The fortress remains behind you, square against the sky. Its walls do not explain themselves. They only stand, absorbing sunlight, watching roads, and reminding every traveller that Pharaoh's justice didn't end where the fields ended. Sometimes it began there. The temple court is quiet, but not empty. Silence gathers here like water in a stone basin. It rests between columns, beneath painted ceilings, around offering tables, and along the shadowed path where priests have already washed, dressed, and entered the morning's ritual with careful steps. You stand outside the sanctuary, Justos, where the air is cool and faintly sweet. Incense hangs in thin layers. Wax smoke clings to the throat. Somewhere, a linen curtain moves, though no wind seems present. The stone floor feels cold beneath the feet, and every sound arrives softened, as if the building itself dislikes interruption. Here, justice listens for more than human voices. In ancient Egypt, legal and religious life were deeply intertwined. Some disputes could be brought before divine images, temple authorities, or oracular processes, especially in certain periods and communities. The gods did not sit on benches like officials. Of course, they moved through ritual, interpretation, procession, and the judgment of those trained to hear meaning in sacred signs. That may sound strange to a modern mind, yet to the people standing here, it could feel completely reasonable. If the gods maintained the world, why should they not reveal truth? If a human witness could lie, perhaps a divine presence could see past deceit. If an official could be bribed, perhaps a god might remain harder to impress. although priests, being human, complicate that comforting thought almost immediately. A mainstream historical fact is visible in records from communities such as Deir el-Medina, where oracles were consulted in legal and social matters. Scholars at Yale, Oxford, and the University of Chicago have studied evidence showing that divine images could be asked questions during processions, with responses interpreted through movement or ritual behaviour. Egyptian justice could therefore include moments where sacred decision and social judgment touched. You can picture the scene. A divine image, hidden or partly veiled, is carried on a portable shrine by priests. People gather with petitions, fear, and hope. The question is spoken or presented. Did this person steal? Should this property pass to that heir? Is the accusation true? The bearers move, pause, advance, or withdraw, and the movement becomes an answer. The crowd watches closely. Too closely, perhaps. A quirky tidbit lies in the wonderfully awkward practical side of divine judgment. When a god's answer depends on a shrine carried by priests, the invisible will of heaven passes through very visible shoulders. Sacred mystery. Meet human knees. A procession may be holy, but someone still has to carry the platform without tripping. That does not make the moment false to its participants. Ritual can feel powerful even when its mechanics are visible. A judge wears clothing, a crown sits on a head, a seal is pressed by a hand. Human action has always carried larger meanings, especially when everyone agrees to treat it as sacred. The petitioner waits with dry lips. Perhaps he's been accused of taking silver from a storehouse. Perhaps she seeks confirmation of ownership after a relative's death. Perhaps a labourer wants justice against a superior who controls rations. The appeal to a god may feel like a final doorway, a place where human politics might be overcome by something older, higher, and less tired. The priests approach. The shrine sways. The question is offered. No one breathes comfortably. If the divine image moves forward, the answer may be yes. If it withdraws, the answer may be no. Practice is varied, and the surviving evidence does not let every gesture be reconstructed with perfect confidence. Still, the principle remains fascinating. The community sought judgment not only through argument, but through sacred performance. The god becomes witness, the god becomes judge, yet this also creates unease. Who interprets the movement? Who controls the ritual space? Who decides whether the answer is clear enough? A divine trial may promise truth beyond human corruption, while still depending on human bodies, human institutions, and human expectations. The god may be believed perfect. The temple staff remains a different matter. An open, scholarly debate continues among researchers at Stanford, Cambridge, and major museum collections over how much authority oracles held compared with administrative courts. Some historians see them as central to dispute settlement in certain communities. Others caution that temple oracles worked alongside ordinary legal structures, not as a replacement for them. The balance may have shifted across time, place, and social need. You feel that uncertainty in the court. A human official may still record the outcome. A scribe may preserve the decision. A local authority may enforce what the oracle confirms. Sacred judgment does not float away from daily life. It lands in property, punishment, reputation, and household consequence. The divine answer becomes practical very quickly. A man accused by oracle does not suffer symbolically. He suffers in public. Imagine the crowd after an unfavourable sign. A murmur moves through them, soft as reeds. The accused looks stunned, angry, or strangely hollow. Friend steps slightly away, not enough to seem cruel, but enough to avoid sharing his stain. The accuser's shoulders loosen. The priests continue the ritual with disciplined calm, because heaven has apparently spoken, and heaven must keep to schedule. There is gentle absurdity in that. There is also real terror. A divine verdict could shape reputation more deeply than ordinary testimony. People might argue with a neighbour. They might distrust an official, but to be judged through a god's presence placed shame on a different level. The accusations seem to rise from beyond the human mouth. That made resistance difficult. How do you cross-examine the unseen? Still, Egyptians were not simple-minded. They knew conflict. They knew manipulation. They knew that people lied, schemed, bribed, complained, and used every available tool to gain advantage. A person might seek an oracle because he trusted the god, or because he hoped the ritual would favour him, or because ordinary routes had failed. Faith and strategy can occupy the same heart without quarrelling too loudly. The temple understands human need. The walls are painted with offerings, kings, gods, and cosmic order. Yet people arrive here with very earthly problems: a stolen garment, a disputed house, a missing donkey, a broken promise, a claim of betrayal. Sacred space does not remove ordinary life. It absorbs it, perfumes it, and sends it back with authority attached. The scent of incense grows stronger. A priest lifts a hand. Another petition is read. This time, the matter concerns a field boundary. Two families claim the same strip of land near an irrigation channel. The dispute has lasted months. Each side has witnesses. Each side has memories. Each side is absolutely certain, which is always dangerous. The god is asked to decide what human certainty has failed to settle. The shrine moves. Someone gasps. The decision ripples through the crowd, and the losing family's faces harden. They must now accept not only defeat, but sacred defeat. The field remains where it always was. The people around it have changed. This is the power of divine justice. It closes arguments by lifting them above argument. It can soothe a community exhausted by dispute. It can also silence doubt too quickly. The same sacred authority that comforts the wronged can crush the uncertain. A god's answer leaves little room for human complexity. Night falls beyond the temple walls. The sanctuary doors close. The god retreats into hidden darkness. Priests finish duties that must be done whether justice felt fair today or not. The courtyard empties slowly. Petitioners walk home beneath the stars, carrying verdicts like warm stones against the chest. Some feel grateful. Some feel ruined. Some wonder whether the god truly spoke, then feel guilty for wondering. That guilt is part of the system too. The dark truth of divine trials is not that Egyptians believed foolishly. It is that they understood something deep about justice. Facts are often incomplete. Witnesses are often conflicted. Officials are often limited. Communities need decisions even when certainty refuses to appear. So they reach toward the gods, hoping that sacred order could settle what human knowledge could not. Sometimes that hope may have brought peace. Sometimes it may have made fear holy. The temple stands beneath the moon, pale and immense. Its columns do not reveal what they have heard. Its stone keeps the day's petitions inside a silence older than any court. Somewhere in the village, a person sleeps badly because a god seemed to answer against him. Somewhere else, another sleeps well for the same reason. And in the cool breath between incense and darkness, justice becomes difficult to separate from belief. The village appears peaceful at sunset, which is exactly what makes it uneasy. Smoke rises from cooking fires. Goats nose at scraps near a wall. A child laughs, then is hushed by an adult who has noticed officials passing down the lane. The laughter does not return immediately. You stand in the fading light, feeling the day lose its heat from the mud brick walls. The scent of onions, barley bread, and animal dung drifts together in the narrow street. Somewhere, a loom creaks softly. Somewhere else, a door closes with a little more care than usual. Order is present here, so is fear. Ancient Egyptian society spoke often of balance, truth, proper conduct, and the defeat of chaos. The language is beautiful, and it is not empty. Fields did need measurement. Irrigation did need cooperation. Taxes did need counting. Tombs did need protection. Families did need legal recognition when memory became too convenient for greedy relatives. But order always asks a question. Who pays for it? A mainstream historical fact is that Egyptian courts, officials, scribes, police forces, and local administrators worked together across many periods to manage disputes and punish crime. Scholars at Oxford, Yale, and the University of Chicago have studied letters, court records, decrees, and village documents that reveal an active legal culture, not merely royal slogans carved for display. This legal culture could help people. It could recover stolen goods, confirm inheritance, identify wrongdoing, and restrain violence. It gave ordinary voices a path, however uneven, into official attention. A worker could complain, a woman could present a claim, a witness could speak, a scribe could preserve a decision when memory wanted to wander away. That deserves recognition, yet every system that protects also watches. Every procedure that records also classifies. Every punishment that restores order also teaches obedience. Egyptian justice did not float above society like a clean star. It moved through status, labour, gender, wealth, fear, and proximity to power. The fear beneath order was not constant panic. It was quieter than that. It was the hesitation before speaking against a superior. It was the careful glance before repeating gossip. It was the knowledge that your neighbour might become a witness, your servant might become an accuser, your own words might return in a scribe's hand. A society can be calm because it is safe. It can also be calm because people know the cost of disturbance. You step into a courtyard where families gather after the day's labour. Men repair tools. Women sort grain. Children drowse against their mothers. An old man tells a story about a thief punished years ago, and though his tone is casual, everyone knows why the story is being told. It is not entertainment only. It is instruction. A quirky tidbit lies in how punishment stories must have travelled through daily life. One marked thief, one exiled worker, one beaten tomb robber, or one disgraced official could become a village memory repeated with small improvements over time. Ancient gossip may have been one of Egypt's most efficient police systems, and unlike official scribes, it required no ink budget. People remembered consequences. This memory helped authority reach beyond its own officers. A state cannot stand in every doorway. It cannot watch every granary, every family chest, every boundary stone, or every whispered insult. So society helps, neighbours observe, relatives warn, children are taught. The punished body becomes a lesson, and the lesson becomes part of the air. That is how power becomes intimate. It enters bedtime warnings. It enters market silence. It enters the way a labourer checks a seal twice before leaving work. It enters the way a widow keeps a document wrapped carefully, because a legal paper may protect her better than a cousin's promise. It enters the way a man accused once is watched forever. The patterns of punishment reveal a society defending several kinds of order at once. There is material order, built from grain, tools, land, rations, taxes, and labour. There is social order, built from family roles, rank, reputation, and obedience. There is sacred order, built from tombs, temples, ritual purity, and the gods' imagined favour. There is royal order, built from the king's image as guardian of the world. A crime could disturb one layer. Some crimes disturbed many. Tomb robbery harmed property, religion, royal dignity, and the dead. Treason threatened palace, succession, and cosmic stability. Theft from a granary endangered food systems and public trust. False testimony attacked the court's ability to produce truth. Even household disputes could shake inheritance and family continuity, which mattered deeply in a culture obsessed with memory. This is why punishment often feels larger than the act. The state was not only asking whether someone suffered a loss, it was asking what kind of disorder might spread if the act went unanswered. That concern can produce justice. It can also produce severity that seems to forget the person kneeling in front of the officials. An open scholarly debate continues among researchers at Stanford, Cambridge, and major museum collections over whether Egyptian justice should be understood mainly as practical conflict resolution or as ideological enforcement of state and sacred order. Some evidence shows negotiation, compromise, and local fairness. Other evidence shows harsh spectacle, coercion, and elite protection. The argument remains alive because both patterns are real. You feel both in the evening air. A woman with a legal claim may bless the system that hears her. A thief with blood on his back may curse the same system as cruelty dressed in ritual language. A farmer whose grain is restored may thank the officials. A poor suspect named by an enemy may feel crushed by a machine too large to answer. Justice is rarely one thing to everyone. It depends where you stand when the sentence is spoken. The village settles into night. Lamps appear in small doorways. The stars brighten above black fields and silver canals. Near a wall, two men speak softly about a recent punishment. One says it was deserved, the other says nothing, which may mean agreement, doubt, fear, or wisdom. Silence has many uses in a watch society. The dark truth is not that Egyptians loved cruelty. That would be too simple and too comforting for the modern listener. The darker truth is that they loved order, and order can become hungry. It asks for proof. It asks for examples. It asks for bodies that show everyone else where the boundary lies. The boundary must be visible, so a criminal may be beaten, a traitor may die, a thief may be marked, a captive may be moved, a worker may be sent to labour under a distant sun. Each punishment says the same thing in a different dialect. The pattern must hold. The fields must remain measured. The tombs must remain sealed. The king must remain central. The gods must remain satisfied. And the living must remain careful. You walk past a house where a child asks why a certain man has no nose. The mother answers quietly, and the child never looks at that man the same way again. In that small exchange, law enters memory. It does not need a courtroom. It does not need a decree. It has become part of the child's imagination. That may be the most lasting punishment of all. Not pain, not exile, not the official record. The lesson. Because once fear becomes a story, it can outlive the person who first suffered it. It can pass from mouth to mouth, generation to generation, until no one remembers every detail, but everyone remembers the warning. Do not steal from the storehouse. Do not speak against the king. Do not touch the tomb. Do not lie before the god. Do not be the person everyone watches. The moon rises over the village, pale and patient. The officials have gone. The scribe has stored his pallet. Families lie down on mats, listening to insects and distant dogs. The kingdom seems still. The order seems complete. Yet beneath that stillness, obedience is breathing. The western horizon receives the sun with quiet ceremony. Its light thins across the fields, touches the river one last time, and slips toward the land of tombs, cliffs, and painted chambers. You stand where cultivation fades into dry earth, watching evening gather over the place Egyptians associated with endings, memory, and the long uncertain road of the dead. The air smells of dust, cooling stone, and faint incense carried from a distant chapel. A funeral procession moves slowly along the path. Men carry offerings. Women mourn with practiced rhythm and real grief. Priests speak words meant to open ways no living foot can test. The body, wrapped and prepared, travels toward a chamber built to resist forgetting. Earthly justice ends at the tomb door, or perhaps it only changes form. Ancient Egyptians believed that a person's life continued into judgment beyond death. The dead might face a weighing of the heart, where truth, conduct, memory, and spiritual fitness mattered with terrifying intimacy. No village official, palace court, or temple oracle could finally settle what the dead person had been. Another judgment waited in the unseen. A mainstream historical fact is preserved in funerary texts studied by scholars at Oxford, Yale, and the University of Chicago, coffin writings, tomb paintings, and later compilations describe moral declarations, divine judges, and the weighing of the heart. These traditions show that Egyptians imagined accountability extending beyond social punishment into cosmic evaluation. That thought softens the story, but only a little. For a person punished in life, the afterlife raised difficult questions. If a thief had been beaten and shamed, was his debt complete? If a traitor had died disgraced, did divine judgment confirm the sentence or see a different truth? If an innocent person confessed under pain, could the gods hear what officials failed to hear? The tomb does not answer. It only waits. You enter a painted burial chamber in imagination. The air is still. Stars cover the ceiling in orderly rows. Figures of gods stand in profile, elegant and remote. Offerings are painted forever on the walls. Bread that never moulds, beer that never sours, birds that never fly away. The dead person's name appears carefully, because a name is a small boat against oblivion. Justice here is no longer public, it is inward. The heart becomes the witness. That is a strange and haunting idea. In life, witnesses could lie, scribes could record imperfectly, officials could be harsh, neighbours could gossip, and power could lean heavily on the weak. In death, the heart itself stood close to truth. A person carried the evidence within the chest, beating quietly through every hidden act. A quirky tidbit rests in one of Egypt's most human fears. Some spells ask the heart not to testify against its owner in the afterlife. There is something almost darkly charming about that. Even beyond death, a person worries that their own heart may become an inconveniently honest witness. Truly, the ancient paperwork never ends, yet the idea is profound. The heart knows what the court cannot. It knows the secret theft, the false denial, the cruel silence, the mercy no one saw, the hunger behind the crime, the fear beneath obedience. It knows whether a person harmed others willingly, or broke under pressure, or survived inside a system that allowed little room for goodness to remain clean. An open scholarly debate continues among researchers at Stanford, Cambridge, and major museum collections over how moral, ritual, and social elements interacted in Egyptian afterlife judgment. Some scholars emphasize ethical conduct and truthfulness. Others stress ritual preparation, proper burial, and access to texts. The evidence suggests that Egyptians wanted both purity of life and protection of ritual. That mixture feels deeply human. People want justice to be moral, but they also want instructions. They want the heart to be clean, but they also want the right words, the right amulets, the right chamber, the right priest. Fear of judgment creates religion, ethics, art, an excellent funeral industry management. Even eternity, it seems, benefits from professional assistance. You look at the painted scales. On one side rests the heart. On the other rests the principle of truth and balance, shown through sacred imagery. Around the scene stand divine beings, watching with calm attention. No shouting, no dust, no guard with a stick, only measure, silence, and the terrible possibility that a life can be known. This judgment differs from Pharaoh's courts in one essential way. It cannot be impressed by status in any simple earthly sense, at least in the ideal imagination. A king, a scribe, a farmer, a woman defending her household, a soldier at the frontier, a thief in the granary shadows, all must somehow face the question of what they have become. Of course, reality complicates even sacred ideals. Wealth allowed better tombs, more texts, finer objects, and greater ritual care. The poor had fewer protections in death, just as they had fewer protections in life. Egyptian afterlife belief carried hope, but also inequality wrapped in linen and gold. The dead did not enter eternity equally equipped. That may be the final dark truth. Even the dream of ultimate justice passed through human hands. Embalmers, priests, families, artists, stonecutters, officials, and wealth shaped the road ahead. A poor person might trust in simple burial and remembered goodness. An elite person might surround the soul with painted spells and carved assurances. The gods may weigh hearts, but society supplied the tomb. You stand in the chamber as the last lamp flickers. The painted face of the deceased looks calm, almost too calm. Perhaps the artist gave him serenity he never felt in life. Perhaps all tomb art is a wish made permanent. The wish says, "Let me be whole. Let me be remembered. Let my mistakes not destroy me forever." Outside, the desert grows blue beneath the moon. The records of punishment, accusation, and sentence remain in the world of the living. Papyrus dries, stone endures, stories pass between families, but the dead person moves beyond the reach of officials. No scribe can follow with a fresh complaint. No guard can drag the soul back into a courtyard. No neighbour can whisper loudly enough to sway the scales. Perhaps that is comforting, perhaps not, because divine justice is not necessarily gentler. It may be more complete. It may see everything the earthly court missed, including the parts people worked hardest to hide. It may also see suffering, coercion, hunger, grief, and fear. If there is mercy in this vision, it lies in the possibility that truth is wider than law. The chamber darkens. The funeral party leaves offerings and steps away. Sand begins its slow work near the entrance. The living return to bread, fields, quarrels, taxes, and guarded speech. The dead remain with painted gods and a heart that must not betray them. Earthly justice fades into memory, but another judgment hovers beyond the painted doorway, and perhaps that is why the story refuses a clean ending. Pharaoh's justice punished bodies, guarded property, defended order, and frightened the living into caution. Yet beneath it all, Egyptians imagined a quieter court, one without village gossip or palace fear, where the heart itself might finally speak, not loudly, only truthfully. Now the night settles fully across the Nile. The river becomes a dark ribbon under the stars, moving with the same patient sound it made for those who feared accusation, those who pronounced sentences, and those who walked punished roads into exile. The fields are still, the temples are dim, the palace walls hold their secrets a little longer. You may let the images soften now. The courtyard empties. The scribe lowers his pen. The guard leans back into shadow. The accused face becomes less sharp, less frightened, more distant. Dust covers the footprint. Moonlight rests on the sealed door. Somewhere, bread cools on a mat, and a child sleeps without knowing the weight of law. The old kingdom drifts away from the mind like smoke from a small lamp. Its punishments, its gods, its officials, and its fearful silences become shapes beneath water. You do not need to judge them completely tonight. You only need to listen as they recede, carrying their questions into the dark. Perhaps justice was order. Perhaps it was fear. Perhaps it was both. Held together by people trying to survive beneath a sun that saw everything and explained very little. The heart remains on the scale, light or heavy, known or unknown. The god waits. The feather waits. The night waits with them, and you can rest now, gently, beside the quiet river of time. The last torch fades. The stone grows cool. The old voices fall silent, one by one, until only the water remains, moving softly through darkness. And perhaps the story is not yet complete. End of script. Good night.